Hi, this is Steve Leone. We're here at InterSolar 2012 in San Francisco, and I'm here with John Lefebvre, President of Suntech America. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, so it's obviously been a wild year in the solar industry, in the global solar industry. And the center of that has been the trade case, and your company has a facility in Arizona. Give us an update on how the trade case has impacted your operations here in the U.S.
Well, certainly. Just to give everyone an update, the trade case is still in the middle of the case.
Sure.
The final determinations will be later this year, and also with the ITC on the critical circumstances. And essentially, how it's affected us is it's made us leverage our global supply chain so that we can now procure cells outside of China with the relationships we've had for years in other markets, and also enables us to focus more on our product and manufacturing in Arizona as well, with providing those cells to Arizona in supply of the market here. And what we see is we'll have ample supply for the market in 2012, 2013 and beyond, because we have large capacity and supply contracts. And so we feel that we're in really good position for the U.S. market currently now in lieu of the trade tariffs. But what I will say is that the trade tariffs in general are just bad for business, bad for competitiveness in the U.S. market, and essentially it's going to have effects on projects getting to fruition and seeing more projects in solar in the U.S. So we're continuing to work through the process with the DOC and the ITC, and we're hopeful in the end that they'll see things our way.
Okay, well, what are some of those difficulties we may see? I mean, it's, for the most part, especially the big players are able to get around, the tariffs. They're complying with the tariffs, by sourcing cells elsewhere. How is that going to impact the American solar industry if panel prices are really marginally more expensive?
Certainly, certainly. So essentially what it's done is create a lot of uncertainty for projects in terms of supply from Chinese panel manufacturers. So there was a pause in the market, I think, until people found out what was going to happen with the case. And now that that's known much more in detail than it was in the past, projects are coming back. But essentially having to source supply outside of China, where you have a very large supply in the market, it's essentially created a global supply and demand now for the U.S. market that's no longer a global supply and demand. Now it's a supply that's far less than it was in the past, and so that could put pricing pressures on panels for the U.S. market in the future.
Okay. You're the only Chinese manufacturer with an operation in the U.S.
That's right.
What's the thinking there? What does Suntech see that perhaps other manufacturers haven't gotten to yet? Why manufacture in the U.S.?
Certainly. So the first thing is that we're committed to this market. We're here for the long term. We only make solar panels. We don't make cars. We don't make flat screens. We don't make other products like toasters or what have you. And so we're committed to solar, and we're committed to solar in the U.S. market. And so having our operation here gives us some leverage and some advantages in certain projects that have funding either through ARA or through the Department of Defense. And so our panels are compliant with some of those projects, so it gives us access to projects we otherwise wouldn't have access to.
Okay. Let's talk about the pricing pressure. We've had a really steep drop in the cost of panels, and certainly don't have to tell you that. It's everywhere you look. With a lot of implications, and one of them is pretty tight margins across the industry. Well, first of all, how sustainable is that long term to have, where we were a couple years ago versus where we are now in terms of margins for manufacturers? How sustainable is that?
Certainly. I used to be in the solar integrator space before this with Solar City. And when I first started, panel prices were around $4 a watt. Today, they're sub $1. And it's been remarkable how the large-scale manufacturing from Asian manufacturers in particular have been able to reduce the costs so dramatically, so quickly with this large scale of supply. And the supply now has outstripped demand, and therefore it's put pressure on costs to be even lower as well as pricing. So in terms of the impact, I think that's good for American projects. I think that's good for more projects getting through its return on investment, so they actually see those projects be implemented. And I think it's good for consumers and residences and business owners, because now solar is more affordable for them to be able to put it on their rooftops. And that's an important thing to consider, because it's creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in the U.S.
Would you say that America ought to have manufacturing of panels coming, domestically?
If you look at a lot of markets, we're not the only market to have gone through this maturation process. If you look at DRAM and other markets like that, you'll see that many times manufacturing, when it comes to low-cost, high-volume manufacturing, it moves to what economists call the comparative advantage country. And those countries often have the scale and the supply chains and the investment in these sectors, because they're building industries and clusters of industries around this. And it gives them the scale to be able to reduce costs and increase volumes that you don't have in all countries or all regions throughout the world. So that comparative advantage makes a significant advantage, and the cost of labor in some of these markets is very helpful. Now, over time, those costs will potentially increase, and you'll see low-cost manufacturing going to other markets. But essentially, it's based on comparative advantage for low-cost manufacturing.
Okay, and it's highly competitive out there. How does your company, which has the advantage in terms of scale, how do you ensure that your company is going to be one of those that survives 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
Sure. I think it comes down to a number of things. One is the quality of the products you make. Customers value that. Two is the size and scale of your company and relationships with your investors and with your suppliers, which we have very, very strong relationships there. And thirdly, it comes down to your ability to execute. And I think we have the finest executive team and manufacturing team in the industry, a very global team, trained in lots of parts of the world, in Europe and the US, as well as Asia. And so their ability to execute and operate the business model, I think, will be a very strong advantage for us long term, so that we will be one of the companies who make it through this consolidation period. And as you'll see, as the supply and demand gets more in check and balance through the consolidation, you'll see pricing stabilize, and our companies will be able to continue to reduce some costs. So I think you'll see our margins grow at some point again after the consolidation has occurred.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your time, and thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Great, thank you.
Take care.